Hello, and welcome to session number 2 of HVAC Onboarding. In this session, we will continue to explore split systems. In addition, we'll also take a look at hydronic systems, geothermal systems, and ductless. We're tracking right around page number 18 in your workbook as well as we start session 2 together, beginning with the air handler. The air handler is an indoor part of a split comfort system. We're still looking at that first major system type, which is a split system. Now, typically, the air handler will be paired with a heat pump. I say typically because some markets, I'll just pick on one, let's say South Florida. It's not uncommon to see a traditional air conditioner paired up with an air handler in that market, simply because, as you could imagine, they don't have a high demand for heat in South Miami. But as a rule, your typical combination would be an outdoor heat pump paired with an indoor air handler. The 4 major components that we'll look at of the air handler include a control board, heat strips or auxiliary heaters, blower motor, and the evaporator coil. Starting with the control board. Now, the good news, wherever you see a control board show up, if it's on an indoor piece of equipment, an outdoor piece of equipment, wherever it's located, it's always kind of doing the same thing. It's helping to control system operation by allowing for proper system function. It is coordinating with the comfort control on the inside of your home, and because it's receiving and interpreting information, we always refer to the control board as the brains of the system, or in this case, the brains of the air handling unit. Heat strips or auxiliary heaters, similarly pictured to what you see here below is an example. It almost looks like the inside of a toaster oven, doesn't it? Now, it is important to understand what these are and when they should operate. When the heat pump can no longer efficiently transfer heat from the outside air, then and only then do we want these heat strips to activate. They provide a boost to the temperature of the air going to the inside of the home on extreme cold days. Now, the activation temperature will vary. That's a very common question that comes up in our live training. You know, what's the magic temperature where these kick in? It can vary by system, the stages of the system. A lot of factors go into that, but here's the guiding principle. Whenever that heat pump sitting outside can no longer efficiently transfer enough heat from the outside air to keep up with demand, then these heat strips will activate to provide the extra boost. There is an alternative, something called hybrid or dual fuel. In this scenario, a split system hybrid would consist of a gas furnace paired with an outdoor heat pump and an evaporator coil. The principle is still the same. When the heat pump can no longer effectively transfer heat from the outside air, the furnace, in this example, would provide that backup heat instead of the electric heat strips. Activation of the temperature of when that takes over, again, varies. A lot of factors go into that. Another question that often comes up is, well, which one should I choose then? Which one should I offer to my customers? A lot of that is based on the market and where you live. For example, some states have really pulled way back from fossil fuel products. Others still, are able to offer the fossil fuel option and the electric option. Your utility rates and your natural gas rates do play into this discussion as well. So consider your area, find out those bits of information so that you can have good conversations with your customers about which may be the best fit. The blower motor. Inside the air handler, there is a blower motor. Now, I will tell you that blower motors have evolved over the years. The absolute darling of the HVAC industry today is something called an ECM blower motor, electronically commutated motor, or you may hear it referred to as an electronically controlled motor is typically how you will hear it phrased. The ECM blower motors have become the darling of the industry for really a few reasons. One, they work across a wide range of equipment options. Two, they're very efficient to operate, and they tend to be the quietest of the motor options available. Now, when the system engages, the blower motor begins to pull air through the returns, in other words, pulling it back toward the unit to be conditioned. Then it distributes the conditioned air through the ductwork into the space to keep the customer comfortable, whether it is in a warm or a cooling season or some of those in between. So the blower motor, back to what we saw in session 1. Remember that outdoor condenser fan motor we looked at in session 1, that one is not moving air in your home. This is what is moving air inside of the space. Number 4, the air handler evaporator coil. The air handler blower motor will move air across the evaporator coil. Now, when that happens, depending on the season and whether we're in AC or heating mode, that is either going to warm or cool the air that is then being distributed into the space. So you notice in our cutaway, and depending on the brand, they may look slightly different. But in our cutaway here, we see the electric heat strips right here at the top. The control board is the green box. The blower motor we find right here. And then we see the evaporator coil. Now, the location can vary slightly depending on the manufactured brand, but that is a really good snapshot of the components that make up the air handler. Furnaces are a little bit more involved. Couple of added notes here. Furnace is a device that is used for high temperature heating. The name is derived from the Greek word fornax, which means oven. Fuel sources for furnaces can either be natural gas, liquid propane, or fuel oil. You don't see fuel oil quite as broad-based as you did a number of years ago because it does tend to be a very high cost of operation. Now, typically, you're going to find a furnace paired up with an air conditioning condenser and an evaporator coil in a split system configuration. But we just learned that the furnace could also be used as a hybrid option when paired up with a heat pump. What are the parts and pieces that allow the furnace to function properly? Well, one of those is the gas valves. They control the flow rate of gas to the burners. Now, the gas valves come in 3 dominant styles in the industry today. They can be single stage, 2 stages, or modulating. Many of the most efficient, most popular, highly efficient furnaces in the market have up to 60 stages on their modulating furnace operation. So there literally is a perfect fit for every customer. Someone looking for a more basic operation, someone for looking, kind of in the middle, and someone who is looking for the absolute most efficient furnace. There's an option for everyone. The inducer assembly, kind of a stock image that you see here, this is a very important component. The inducer assembly is moving air for proper combustion in a very critical part of the furnace. A small fan pulls air through the heat exchanger and sends an exhaust to the outside through a vent pipe. The heat exchanger is incredibly important. In fact, we refer to the heat exchanger as the workhorse of the furnace. It is the component that is actually heating the air. Obviously, notice its name, the heat exchanger. It gets very hot. When the air moves across the heat exchanger, heat transfer takes place. It warms up the air, which then comes inside to keep us comfortable on those cold winter days. And it is very important for this area to be balanced. In other words, we want it hot to heat the air, but not too hot so that it leads to cracks. A cracked heat exchanger is one of the most costly and expensive repairs to the furnace. So keeping that area properly vented is a premium for sure. Now, in a subsequent session that we're going to look at in this course of study, we're going to have a specific look at indoor air quality and filtration. I wanted to put a note right here because whether it be an air handler or a furnace, many times you're going to have filters that are working with whatever type of system is in place. If you ask the typical customer, hey, why do you have filters at your home? Think about that for a second. How do you think they would answer that? I would suggest that probably 9 out of 10 would say for themselves, or it helps the quality of the air that we're breathing. And there's absolute truth to that. However, lest we forget, the number one reason that you have filters built into your space is first for the system. So educate your customers when you're talking to them and say, we do have specialty products that really are more designed for you and I in terms of getting aggressive in the type of, particles that can be captured and dealing with smoke and odors. That's absolutely wonderful. But the core reason you have the basic return type filters in your home design is because think of the last time you changed your filter. Now, I know somebody's making a note right now, change filters tonight. We never forget those, right? Think about the last time you changed your filter. How'd it look? Hopefully not too bad. But whatever you have built up on the face of that filter, imagine if it weren't there. Right. Where would all that stuff collect? It would collect on many of the components that we've seen so far, caking up on the blower motor, caking up on the coils, and getting trapped in the parts of the system. Depending on the type and the design of your ductwork, maybe you get some buildup and collection there. So filters serve a purpose, and one of their primary purposes is to protect the system. The furnace control board. Anytime you see a furnace with a control board, remember, it's always kind of doing the same thing. The brains of the furnace, controlling furnace operation, working with that comfort control to help provide the perfect amount of heat from cycle to cycle. So again, our nickname for the control board is the brains of the system, or in this case, the brains of the furnace itself. Now, inside of the furnace, it too has a blower motor. Remember, we said blower motors have evolved over the years. The darling of the industry has become the ECM blower motor. There is something that I want you to really note, and this is in your workbook. There should be a place for extra notes in this section regarding the fan efficiency rating or the FER rating. Now, this came about in late 2019, early 2020. Does anybody remember what else was happening in early 2020? Right? The world was in the midst of learning some new language, coronavirus, and then COVID-19, and the rest, unfortunately, is history. So this kind of flew under the radar, and understandably so. So as you have customers who are now beginning to shop for new systems and updating their furnaces and things of that nature, this question is going to come up. You are going to have customers who are Googling, what should I look for in a new furnace? And they're going to see the label, make sure that it is approved in the FER rating. Now, obviously, since this was late 2019, early 2020, the process of updating inventory has occurred, but questions will still remain. So I would encourage you from your manufacturer partner or your local distributor representative, they will have additional documentation that verifies that their products are indeed FER compliant. It basically was just a regulation passed by the Department of Energy that limits the power consumption of furnaces as well as small package products, which we'll look at in this session as well of these classes of our onboarding journey together. So again, just wanted to put that on your radar. Please do be aware of it. So in a conversation next week or over the next few weeks, if you're talking to a customer or maybe even a team member and they make reference to the FER rating, you now know what they're talking about. Within the furnace, We also have the igniter, which kind of kicks the party, gets the party started, if you will, as the furnace begins to engage. Now, with individuals or families, especially those who've never had a furnace in their home, they're going to want to know, how safe are they? That's a very fair question. So here are 4 of the most common safety features that are built into modern furnace lineups, so you will have that conversational knowledge to be able to have good discussions with customers and, for that matter, even your team members. Number 1 is pressure switches. These prevent carbon monoxide from entering the living space that could be caused by a blocked vent, trap, or drain, or even a blocked heat exchanger. Remember how important that component is. Carbon monoxide is nothing to play with. In smaller doses, it can cause cloudiness and confusion, severe headaches, body aches and pains, flu-like symptoms. In higher doses, it can be absolutely lethal. So, definitely an important piece of the puzzle to let customers know that there are metrics in place that are helping to monitor that key factor for sure. Number 2, main limit switches prevents excessive heat buildup, which prevents heat exchanger failures, because that is important. That heat exchanger is the workhorse of the furnace, and it is usually the single largest repair to the furnace itself. It also helps to prevent ignition of combustibles near the furnace. Number 3, the flame rollout switch. These prevent the burner flame from extending outside of the burner box. Obviously, that's a big deal. Prevents damage to other furnace components, and prevents ignition to combustibles near the furnace. Number 4, the flame sensor prevents raw gas from building up in the combustion department, preventing damage to other components, prevents ignition of combustibles near the furnace, and prevents the flame from rolling back due to a lack of combustion air. Did you notice that this middle line showed up on 3 of the 4 slides? That strike you as a little odd? You will learn, for those of you that are brand new, if you're going to be out in the field, you will see very quickly that individuals and families have a real common thread of storing flammable items. I know that sounds nuts here in the safety of our, onboarding class together, but it happens all the time. People will store aerosols and paint and dried up wrapping paper or art supplies or oily rags next to, beside, and sometimes even on the furnace itself. Well, yes, there are safety features built in. That's true. But I think a good dose of common sense goes a long way. I'm sure you will agree. So always educate your customer. In a perfect world, and I know that's not always possible, but in a perfect world, you would want 3 to 5 feet of clearance around the unit first, so you can service it properly at your biannual maintenance visit to their home. Number 2, as an added layer of protection. So share the safety features that are in place, but also be sure to remind the customers that a little extra prevention does go a very long way. So let's do another review section together. True or false? The main purpose of the condenser fan assembly is to move air across the condenser coil, which enhances heat transfer. What do you think? Based on what we've looked at so far, is that true or is that false? Listen to it carefully. The main purpose of the condenser fan assembly is to move air across the condenser coil, which enhances heat transfer. Well, based on what we've seen so far in our study together, that is definitely a true statement. Number 2, what is the main function of the blower motor? The main function of the blower motor. Now, we've looked at 2 motor-driven fans or blowers so far. One was the condenser fan assembly earlier, and now we looked at the blower motor. Those are 2 very different things. So with the blower motor in particular, what is its main function or main purpose? think about where it's located, right? We saw the blower motor located inside the air handler, or so far in our study, we've seen it also inside the furnace. Based on where it's located, its main function is to pull in return air and then deliver conditioned air to the space. So when the air handler blower motor begins or the furnace blower motor begins, we're pulling air back to the unit to be conditioned, and then that blower motor is delivering the conditioned airflow into the space. How about a question on the heat exchanger, which we looked at in this section as well? The heat exchanger in a furnace is the component that is actually heating the air. Now, we made a big to-do over it. Is this an accurate statement? Okay, the heat exchanger is important, but is this what it's doing? Okay, remember, as we looked at it, we kind of showed you where it is in the body of the furnace, and we talked about its function. Would that be true or false? As it's written right here, that would be true. That heat exchanger is going to get very warm, and as the air moves across it, true to its name, heat exchange or heat transfer is going to take place. How about a question on hybrid systems? Hybrid systems use electricity and either natural gas, liquid propane, or fuel oil to heat your home. Again, would that be true or false? Now, here's a hint. When we looked at the hybrid section, hybrid systems also go by another name. If you remember what else they're called, you will have a clue to answering this correctly. Hybrid systems use electricity and either natural gas, liquid propane, or fuel oil to heat your home. That is true. Hybrid systems are called dual fuel, two fuel sources. So electricity is one, and then either natural gas, liquid propane, or fuel oil, in our example here, could be source number two. Good job. A little bit more conversational review in this section. Among those furnace safety features, which one do you think would be asked about the most? There's a lot there. They're all important. But there is one safety concern that is going to be top of mind with most individuals and families, and that is carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is different than carbon dioxide, right? Carbon monoxide is the dangerous of the two. It's odorless, but it can also, in high doses, be lethal, and that is not an overstatement. It is nothing to be toyed with. That is why the system has monitors to check this, but also a best practice as an installing contractor. When you install a fossil fuel product for a customer, it is always a best practice to also install a carbon monoxide detector that you update and check on a regular basis, just as an added precaution for the customer. TXV, piston, EXV are all examples of what? What did we call those earlier in our study? They're very important. They serve a very specific purpose. TXV, piston, EXV, what did we call those? Very, very important. In fact, if these aren't working properly as a clue, heat transfer is also not going to be happening properly, because if these don't work properly, the ability to absorb heat in one area and release heat somewhere else is definitely affected. So all of these are metering devices. Metering devices where we are changing from high pressure to low pressure, and the ability to do that properly is critical for the system to function as it should. So this last one almost seems a little nonsensical in our study here, because you might be thinking, well, that's pretty cut and dry. Well, to a lot of people, it's not. And especially to customers who don't do this for a living, this could be a little confusing. I can't tell you the number of times over the years that I answered a call, maybe a no-heat call of a customer, go out to their home, and on my paperwork it says, furnace not working. But when I get to their home, they don't have a furnace. A lot of people just call anything that heats their house the furnace, and it's actually not. So it's important to educate your customers on what they actually have, how it functions, and that just brings them in the loop, especially if you're going to be putting something else in the home. They need to understand what they have had and what's coming in. So something this simple. How does a furnace heat your home versus an air handler? Well, a furnace is going to use a fossil fuel source, something of natural gas or liquid propane or fuel oil. An air handler is an electric source. So that sounds, again, very simple, but it really does help to help your customer to understand what they have and what you may be replacing or repairing there in their space. So believe it or not, in our first 2 sessions or a session and a half together, all of our focus has been on the first comfort system type, which is the split system. Our second system type we're going to look at now, right on page 25 in your workbook, is hydronic systems, and in particular, we're going to look at the application with boilers. Now, boilers can either be circulating hot water or steam, depending on the type of boiler you're using. The hot water tends to be most popular across markets where we are working with contractors that have installation applications like this, but both are available. So they actually are pretty straightforward. Notice in our animation, we have the boiler pulling from a water source. The water source comes into the boiler where it is superheated, and then that hot solution transfers through a series of pipes to get to the individual rooms where we want to radiate or release the heat. Well, how does it get to these places, and what are the options available? There are 2 primary designs of boilers that are used within the industry. The first is kind of the classic workhorse, the cast iron boiler. Now, these are rated 83 to 85% efficient on something called the AFU ratings or scales. Now, we're going to look in a subsequent session coming up, we're going to define all these efficiency terminology. But while we're here, just so you know, AFUE is a rating system showing the efficiency of furnaces, boilers, and we'll also see it in a subsequent session on small package products as well. The principle is simple. The higher the number, the more efficient the operation. So the cast iron boilers are usually around 83 to 85% on that scale. Here's another way you could say this to a customer with conversational language. Well, Ms. Johnson, the cast iron boiler that we're looking at here is around 85% efficient. Now, let me tell you in practical terms what that means. In terms of your cost of operation, about 85 cents of every dollar spent in the operation of the unit is going to be realized as heat in your home. About 85 cents of every dollar will be realized as heat in your home. It takes about 15 cents on a dollar to generate that heat. That's just a real easy way to help them understand what that efficiency score is trying to communicate. Now, the cast iron boilers are relatively simple, very reliable, but believe me when I tell you, they can also be very heavy because they have a cast iron core as the heat exchanger, compared to the newer kid on the block, respectively, which is the low mass boiler. Now, these are much smaller. They're more versatile because they don't weigh as much. They're easier to manipulate in tight spaces. And the biggest reason that they are more versatile and lighter is because it has a stainless steel heat exchanger versus the cast iron heat exchanger you see here. Not only are they smaller, more versatile, and lighter, they're also more efficient. Typically 90 to around 92% is where a lot of these land on that AFUE score. So here you could say the low mass boiler about 92 cents of every dollar of operation is going to be realized as heat in your home. It takes about 8 cents on a dollar to generate the heat because it's more efficient in the way it operates. So how do we get this hot solution, whether it's water or it's steam, to the individual areas to release the heat? Hydronic piping is the way we do that. Two main options. One is copper piping, which is the most traditional. It tends to be far more labor intensive, however. To assemble this on site is a slower process and it adds time to the job. What does adding time to the job do? It, of course, adds to the bottom line as well. So as a result, many contractors have gone to a PEX type of tubing. It is a plastic feel to the touch. It is a flexible tubing. And as you can see in our new construction example here, it's a heck of a lot easier to manipulate around HVAC and around electrical and around plumbing compared to your traditional copper piping. So it's kind of a trade there, one for the other. Both are used in markets, but again, this tends to be a little bit more user-friendly, certainly in tight applications. So once you get to the individual room where you want to release the heat, what are some options? Baseboard heaters have been around for decades. Where they are installed properly, they are a very effective way of releasing heat into the room. The old radiators of old, like you see here, the old eyesore, the big clunkers, have been updated and replaced, largely thanks to European design, with many of the options looking similar to this. Now, here's what I guarantee you. You could host a dinner party at your home, and most people would not have any idea what they're looking at, especially if you painted these white brackets here. If you painted them gray to match the wall, and where those kind of blend in as well, I'll bet you that 8 out of 10 people who came in your home would just think that's some type of design that you have in the space. It is so much more modern and stylish than its predecessor a generation ago. So yes, they have come a very long way. Now, an option with a hydronic system, if you have traditional ducted AC delivery in your home, you could take the hydronic coil and tie it into your traditional ducted AC system, and in that scenario, heat could be distributed through the ducted air delivery system. This is going to take the place of some of the traditional coils we saw earlier today. These would be installed. They would have the heat that would be emanating or exchanging from these coils and then being distributed into areas of your home through your ducted system. You don't see that as often because you have the added cost of the ducted delivery system and the hydronic. So that is more of a specialty feature as opposed to something you see in a wide, broad-based operation usually. Radiant flooring. Radiant flooring can be a whole home application or used in specific rooms or areas of the home. The principle is simple. Once installed, heat rises, meaning the floors are warm, even temperatures in the room. There's even a towel bar accessory, so when you step out of the bath or shower, no more stepping on the cold tile. The tile is nice and warm, the room is comfortable, and your towel, since it's tied into that flow of the hot solution preheating it, it's just like having a spa day every time you step out of the shower. Man, it sounds nice, right? We actually, in upstate South Carolina, where I live, this is a popular combination. Many of the custom home builders in our region in the master bedroom and spa area of the home incorporate radiant flooring, and where installed properly, I'm going to tell you what, customers tend to really love this application. Now, we have a couple of options. This can be an electric grid that warms, or hot water options where have the hot water flowing through the grid of piping that is there. Now, many times this will be used in addition to a ducted delivery system for other parts of the home, because in my experience, at least in our markets, this tends to be directed toward a custom home in the master bedroom bath area, and especially if there's a spa area tied in to the home itself. Right around page number 29 in your workbook, when we started session number 1, early in that session, I showed you an image like this right here when we were talking about split systems. And we said a split system is called a split system because the products involved are literally split in different locations, some outside, some inside. Well, the next system we're going to explore is a package unit. Can you see why we call it a package unit? Yeah, it is a different design, very different than the split system configuration. A package unit is an all-in-one unit, 100% outside the home. The only thing that would run inside in this system option is the ductwork, delivering the conditioned air to the space and drawing the air back to be conditioned at the unit itself. There are 3 options with these package units: a gas package unit, a heat pump package unit, or a hybrid or dual fuel package unit. So we're going to go through these individually. You are going to see that many of them are similar, and there are some differences from one to the other that we will highlight together. Starting with the gas package unit. The gas package unit will have a fan assembly. The fan assembly, its function is to move air across the package unit coil, which enhances heat transfer. Gee, doesn't that sound familiar? Earlier today, or earlier in our sessions together, when we looked at the outdoor unit of a split system, we saw the outdoor fan assembly, didn't we? And that fan assembly was doing exactly the same that we're seeing right here. It's moving air across that coil. The gas package unit will have a compressor. The compressor is the heart of the package unit. It is circulating refrigerant under pressure. One thing to please note, package unit compressors have limited stages. We said earlier today that in a split system, in session number 1, with a split system configuration, we know that the compressor could be 1 stage, 2 stages, or hundreds of stages. Well, here we discover that with package units, the stages are much more limited. Most of the package units that are popular in the market today will have 1 stage or 2. So that is a worthy distinction to keep in mind. Inside of the gas package unit, which is the first one we're looking at here, there are 2 coils. There's a large condenser-style coil which wraps around the outer edge of the package unit, and inside is a smaller evaporator coil. So again, in session 1, when we were looking at the split systems, we found that the outdoor unit had a condenser coil and the indoor location had the evaporator coil. Well, here, the same 2 coils are showing up. They're just not in different locations. They're housed in one package unit together, but they're doing the same thing we saw in session number 1. The control board. Wherever you see the control board show up, it's always doing the same thing. It's the brains of the system. In this case, the brains of the package unit. Why do we say that? Because it's working with the comfort control inside your home, receiving data, interpreting information, helping to decide exactly what this package unit needs to do to satisfy the request that it has received. The gas package unit, by virtue of its name, is going to have gas valves. the gas valves control the flow of gas to the burners because we're going to have some type of a gas heating that is taking place. Now, worthy of note here as well, package units, gas package units are more limited with the gas valves. Do you remember in the gas furnace section, as we've gone through our study together, we said that furnaces could be single stage, 2 stages, or modulating, which could be the most popular, or up to 60 stages. Gas package units don't have that wide of a range. They're going to have 1 stage or 2 predominantly that you see in the most popular models. The gas package units will also have an inducer assembly. They are moving air for proper combustion in a very important part of the gas package unit housing itself. It is doing the same thing here that we saw in a furnace. Remember, a small fan pulls air through the heat exchanger, releasing an exhaust in the back or the side of the unit. Why does that matter? Because the heat exchanger is the workhorse of the gas package unit in regard to heating the customer's home. It is the component that is actually heating the air. We do not want this area to get too hot because it will crack. And a cracked heat exchanger, either in a furnace or in this case, a gas package unit, is a very costly item. So this is a very, very important piece of operation that has to take place properly, not only to keep the customer comfortable, but also to allow the unit to function at an optimal level. The gas package unit will have a blower motor. Now, as we've mentioned, over the last several years, the ECM style of blower motors have really overtaken the industry. They are the absolute darling of the industry. Remember, because they work across a wide range of equipment, they are very, very quiet, and they're very efficient to operate. Please note this. In your workbook, there should be a spot for some extra notes, or write this in the margin. Gas package units, just like furnaces we saw in our previous session together, they are impacted by the fan efficiency rating, the FER rating. That means that late 2019, early 2020, there was a mandate that required the update of blower motors and gas package products to transition to these ECM blower motors. Now, at this point, that has taken place, but customers who are just now going on Google and researching, hey, what should I look for in a system? They're going to see this terminology, and they're going to know to ask you as a local provider, hey, is this gas package product, or if it was a furnace that we saw in our earlier section, is this FER compliant? Now you'll know, number one, what they're talking about, and number two, you can get information from your manufacturer, supplier, your distributor partner that can help you have good conversations and validate that your products are indeed FER compliant. Now, that was the gas package unit. Here is a heat pump package unit. You're going to notice there are several of these components that are exactly the same, but there's also some that are different. Let's go through it. The heat pump package unit will have a fan assembly. That fan assembly is moving air across that large coil there in the system, helping heat transfer to take place. Inside the heat pump package unit, you will have a compressor. The compressor is the heart of the package unit. It is circulating refrigerant under pressure. And again here, heat pump package units will have more limited stages than the split systems we saw back in session number 1. Most of the heat pump package units dominant in the market today are going to have 1 stage or 2 on their compressor operation. The coils inside of a heat pump package unit, There's going to be a condenser style coil, the large coil that wraps around the outer edge of the package unit itself. We have a smaller evaporator coil. These two coils are working together just like we saw in split systems earlier in our study, except for here, they're in one place, but they're doing the same thing. The control board. In a heat pump package unit, this would be the brains of the package unit, helping to control system operation by working with that comfort control on the inside of your home. The blower motor. The heat pump package unit is going to have a blower motor. Again, predominantly, most all of the blower motors, no matter where you see them show up and no matter what product that it is in, many of them have already transitioned to, and many of them are being transitioned to these ECM blower motors. They really have become the go-to choice in the industry. So with the blower motor, remember that we are pulling air back to the unit to be conditioned and then delivering the airflow into the space to keep the customer comfortable. Now, here are a few distinctions of the heat pump package unit that we did not see in the gas package application. We have heat strips or auxiliary heaters. When the heat pump package unit can no longer efficiently transfer heat from the outside air, then these heat strips will activate. In other words, we don't want these running all the time. These are backup or auxiliary heaters when and if needed. Now, there is an alternative to these heat strips. A hybrid or dual fuel package unit would replace these electric heat strips with some type of a fossil fuel heating source. In that scenario, when the heat pump package unit could no longer effectively transfer heat from the outside, then this nice warm fossil fuel or natural gas heat would come on instead of the heat strips. Just a reminder that we talked about earlier in our study, how do you know which one to highlight for your customer? Can depend on where you live. Some markets have really shied away from fossil fuel products. Your area may offer both. It may be more economical, electric versus natural gas or LP, so those are guiding factors in your market. So you always want to highlight those, make your customer aware, and then, hey, just let the customer do what they do best, which is decide what's best for their family moving forward. The heat pump package unit also has these distinctions. It'll have a defrost board. Just like a split system heat pump we saw back in session 1, the heat pump package unit is going to go through a defrost cycle. So the defrost board is critical to that function taking place. Also, by virtue of the fact that it is a heat pump package unit, it's in the heat pump family, we know we have to have the reversing valve. The reversing valve is what is going to help us change the direction of the flow of refrigerant, which directly impacts, remember, where we're absorbing heat and where we're releasing heat, depending on whether we're in cooling mode or in heating mode. So, some conversational knowledge review at the end of this section, okay? Question number 1. What are the 3 types of package units available? We just looked at them together, okay? So remembering back through that, and since we just completed that, these will be top of mind. The first one was the gas package unit. The second one was the heat pump package unit. And the third one is kind of a cousin to this one, kind of an offshoot of the heat pump package unit, is the dual fuel package unit. So 3 options available, and that you can have good discussions with your customers about what may be the best fit depending on your particular market location. So think through this with me. Why would a customer choose a package unit instead of a split system? Now, back in session 1, we looked at the beginning of that split system. We finished it in this session here together. Now looking at a package unit. When would someone choose a package unit instead of one of those split systems? Think about that for a second. Come up with a few scenarios in your mind of when you think that might apply. In the industry, this really comes down to 2 primary reasons when this happens. Number 1, some type of a space limitation where a traditional system just won't fit. So maybe they have a low crawl space, nothing's going up underneath the home. They don't have a mechanical area available, and maybe in an older home, the attic is not conducive for something to go up there. So sometimes space limitations lead to this decision. Another common preference is just the customer. And along the way, I've met individuals and families who told me, said, look, I'll make it real simple. I don't want a piece of equipment in my home anywhere. I don't want it in a mechanical closet. I don't want it under my house in a crawl space or a basement. I don't want it in the attic. I don't want any mechanical equipment inside. They wanted everything outside. Now, of course, remember, even with the package unit being outside, the ductwork is still going to run inside to deliver the comfort inside the home. But those tend to be the 2 biggest reasons of why a person leans toward a package unit, or you as a contractor may steer the customer toward it in a space limitation example, or they may have a preference toward a package versus a split. So page number 33, as we continue our journey through here in session number 2, we're going to take a look at probably, in my opinion, the most unique type of system that we have seen so far in our study together, and that is geothermal. Now, the geothermal systems are distinctly different than the traditional split systems that we've looked at previously. In this regard, geothermal systems transfer heat to or from the earth. Traditional systems, like the split systems we saw earlier, transfer heat to or from the air. So with a geothermal, the earth becomes a heat source in the winter, and the earth becomes a heat release in the summer. Now, as we go through this section, I want to give you a snapshot of a couple of efficiency ratings. We will talk about these further as we go through our study in subsequent sessions. But while we're here, for you to really understand the benefit of geothermal, I wanted to highlight these for you at this point. Coefficient of performance, or COP, is a measurement of heating efficiency. It is the amount of energy produced divided by the energy that is used. For example, a geothermal unit with a coefficient value of 4 means that 1 kilowatt of electrical energy will produce 4 kilowatts of heat. Not too bad. Geothermal ranges in this particular metric between 3 and 5 is where most geothermal systems are going to land. Heat pumps in general will also show up in this metric, but it is also something specifically applied to geothermal systems. So that's very solid and very good. However, here is where geothermal really shines, especially in some markets where you have long, hot, cooling seasons. EER stands for Energy Efficiency Ratio. It is the measurement of cooling efficiency in extreme conditions. That is super important to highlight or underline, or something that's going to draw your attention to that. The definition of extreme conditions in this test parameter is a 95-degree outdoor temperature. Now, for most of the country, with the exception of California, Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico, a 95-degree day is an extreme temperature day for sure. So the goal of this is to determine how well is the cooling part of the system going to perform in that condition. The higher the EER number, the more efficient the operation of the system. EER scores for geothermal range from 15 to over 30. To give you an example, the split systems that we looked at to begin our study, those systems tap out at around 15 or 16 on the EER table. Geothermal begins where they tap out. And we'll show you in this section on geothermal how it is able to score so much higher. Now, as we have seen, as we're looking at system combinations, we have looked at split systems and we have looked at package units. Well, guess what? Geothermal gives you two options in terms of design. There are package unit options and there is a split system option as well. The standard geothermal system is a package unit. The standard look is what you see here closest to me. This is designed, notice, to be inside. This is not designed to be sitting out in the yard. This would need to be in a basement or a mechanical area or somewhere sheltered from the elements. However, some geothermal manufacturers have started creating outdoor options for the package unit option. This is an example of a popular design used by one of the leading geothermal manufacturers in the industry. So depending on what you're offering to the customer, you may have both available or you may only have the typical traditional package unit. So double check with your manufacturer's representative to see if you have both available or perhaps just the standard package unit design. Now, there are times, and again, space-related issues is very common to this decision. A person may opt to go with a split system geothermal instead of a package unit. That is an option with the geothermal design. Basically, what this split system does, it takes the components that are in this standard package unit and it divides it into two sections. In the smaller section, you have the compressor and water to refrigerant heat exchanger. In an air handler designed to work with geothermal application, you have the blower motor. You also have the air to refrigerant heat exchanger in this particular piece of equipment. Something a lot of people don't realize, hybrid options are also available in a split system geothermal option so that in very, very cold temperatures, you could have that nice warm heat in natural gas or other options in those designated times. So as we're looking through this, the big question everybody always has, how on earth does a geothermal system absorb or release heat with the earth? That is how it's distinctly different. Well, how on earth does it accomplish that? It accomplishes that by a series of loops that are placed in the ground. There's a horizontal loop, a vertical loop, a pond or lake loop, and also a well water loop. And we're going to go through each of these individually. Couple of things to clarify. What is the solution that is running through these loops? Well, it's just good old-fashioned water and some type of a propylene glycol solution, which is just a $20 term for antifreeze. That's what actually is running through the loop itself. Something that a lot of people also mistakenly believe about geothermal is they think it doesn't use any refrigerant. Well, the refrigerant is not running through the loop. The refrigerant is running through the coils in the system. So let's back up. In our package unit here, with our geothermal package unit, you're going to have a coil that's made in this section here. There's also a smaller coil operation down here. In our combination here, inside of our geo-approved air handler, you've got a coil in here. So yes, the water solution moving through the ground, that is part of the heat exchange of geothermal, but as it comes to the particular product itself, you also have refrigerant running through the system coils, which helps to aid in that heat transfer as well. Just keep that in mind in case you see it in a review or a quiz question later. I'm not sure. So again, that'll help you to stay clear on something that, again, can be a little bit confusing with this system type. I love this ground map here. Now, this is an added slide. This is not in your book. If you want to do a screenshot, certainly feel free to do so. No heartburn over that at all. This really explains how geothermal in cooling operation in particular is so incredibly efficient in hot areas of the country. So I'm going to pick on upstate South Carolina. I'm coming to you today from right at just about where that line is, right there. So let's take a 95-degree day, which it was 100 here yesterday at the time of this recording. 100 degrees outside yesterday with a traditional system. That system would be sitting outside trying to release the heat of my home against 100-degree air temperature. That's a bit of a struggle. Or if I had geothermal, it would have been right about a 62 to 64 degree earth temperature, which is easier. Yeah, it's a whole lot easier to exchange the heat of my home against a 64 degree earth than a 98 or a 99 or 100 degree air temperature. If I go all the way down here to Miami, okay, when it's 98 degrees in Miami, the temperature difference is not as large, but even in Miami, when it's blistering hot at 100, 102 or whatever, okay, the hot humid days in Miami, it's still around 75 to 77 degrees way down here. It's still a better and an easier exchange in those extreme temperature days. So here's a couple of added slides that again just helps us visualize what's going on. When the air is warmer in the summertime application, the ground is cooler. It's easier to exchange heat here than here. What about in the winter? Up here, when the air is cold, the ground is warmer. So again, it's easier to exchange heat here than it is here. That is the secret sauce, if you will, of how a geothermal operates and can be enormously efficient, and particularly in the EER cooling side of the aisle, can be significantly more efficient on those extreme temperature days compared to a basic or a traditional, I should say, system. Let's look at these loops. Now, the first one is called a horizontal closed loop. Horizontal because it literally is a horizontal installation. Closed meaning we're not pulling from a live source of water. We're just recirculating the water in the loop. Biggest thing to remember about this, of course, you look before you dig, right? Electric lines, plumbing, all this. You want to make sure the pathway is clear, but you also want to make sure that you're installing the horizontal loop below the frost line. That can be slightly different in your market compared to mine, but definitely worthy of note for this system or this loop configuration. What about if you don't have, by the way, on a horizontal loop, you need about 1/3 of an acre or more in terms of available space to really do that effectively. Not everybody has that. So if you're in a tighter lot and you don't have 1/3 of an acre or larger to work with, you could still potentially enjoy geothermal technology by going with a vertical closed loop. Again, vertical because that is the design and the direction of the loop. It's a closed loop because we're not pulling from a live source here. We're just recirculating that water and propylene glycol solution in the loop itself. Now, the depth can vary, but as a rule, you're looking about 500 to 600 feet of loop per ton of the system. In subsequent sessions in this study, we're going to define tonnage and how we calculate that. But while we're here, just to give you an example, If I had a 3-ton geothermal system, I would need somewhere between 15 to 1,800 feet of loop for that system to function properly. So those are some of the dynamics that go into considering if geothermal would be a good fit from a design perspective for your customer. The third type of loop is a pond loop or a lake loop. Now notice this is still listed as a closed loop because most public lakes will not allow you to pull from a live source in a public setting. Now maybe some will, but a lot of them will not let you do that. Many of them will allow you to put a closed loop submerged in the lake. You always verify that because market to market, it can be different. So never assume. Your local Corps of Engineers, your codes department, all of those can give you guidance on what's accepted where you live. But where allowed, this would be an example of a pond or a lake loop where a grid, like you see here, is taken offshore and then submerged so that you're able to have that conduction there with the water because water is a great, great conductor. So it helps to enhance that exchange. Now, one thing to keep in mind that is very important, you want to make sure that this grid is far enough off the shoreline so that you go through drought cycles. And again, your local Corps of Engineers can give you guidance on what that looks like in your area because it can be very different from market to market. So that may be anywhere from 10 to 12 feet, 15 to 20 feet, 30 feet or more, depending on where you live, as these lake levels will vary as you go through drought cycles. So that is one thing to keep in mind, very important with this loop design style. Last but not least, this loop is a well loop, and you'll notice that it is the only one we have come to so far that is labeled open. That is because this is the only one that would be pulling from something that is probably private and on your properties. In other words, we're not pulling from a public well. It's usually going to be a private well on your property. So in this scenario, you have to check a couple of things. One, can the well supply the proper amount of flow? On average, you need around 3 gallons per minute per ton. So again, we're going to discuss tonnage in a subsequent session of the class coming up. But for our example here, if I had a 3-ton geothermal system, I'm going to need 9 to 12 gallons of flow per minute from this well. So that's test number one. Can it supply that amount? Number two is not only the quantity, but the quality. Since it's an open draw, I'm going to be getting a lot of silt and debris and dirt and things like that. I need to test the quantity and the quality of the water. With any open loop design, you have to use specialty coils, specialty filters. Your maintenance schedule is different because you could imagine you're going to get a lot more debris in this design, so you have to clean the system more frequently. So all of these are good, but they all come with little differences and nuances, don't they, that you have to be aware of for proper design and function. I will say this, having been at a company where we did a lot of geothermal, these systems, where designed properly and installed correctly, give years of very efficient service and wonderful enjoyment to families. They really, really can be absolutely a wonderful comfort solution, again, where installed and done correctly. Making our way through our last system type that we're going to look at as we come to the conclusion here of our second session together will be our ductless systems. Now, just at a glance, you probably pick up on the fact of why we call it ductless. Ductless systems are in the heat pump family. They provide heating and cooling. You'll often hear them referred to as a mini split system. And the difference is they are designed to deliver the comfort directly into the individual rooms without the need of ductwork to do so. Now, yes, full disclosure, there is a specialty made smaller duct that you can use in certain designs to link some of these heads, particularly the ceiling head modules, together. That is true. But the beauty of a ductless system predominantly is that you don't have to have duct work to deliver the comfort into the individual spaces. Let's look at the configuration and the individual parts and pieces that are involved with a ductless system. Starting outdoor. You have an outdoor unit that has a compressor. It is going to be a variable stage compressor. These compressors with mini split or ductless systems do have a wide range of operation. How will you know the staging on the ones you're offering? That's where your product data and your product manager can give you guidance on that. But these do have the variable stage options where they can speed up or slow down based on the demand of the day. Also in the outdoor unit, we have a small coil. Adjacent to the coil is the fan motor. And again, doesn't that sound familiar? So here we have the compressor, which would be the heart of the comfort system, moving refrigerant through the outdoor coil. The fan is blowing across the coil, doing what? Allowing for heat transfer to take place. What about our indoor unit? Here we have an indoor wall-mounted unit known as the air handler. Inside of the air handler, we have a blower motor. We have a smaller coil and a filter. A lot of times people don't realize that ductless systems still allow you to have a degree of filtration. The filters can either be pulled out and replaced or pulled out, cleaned, and simply reused. So here we have another summertime example. We have the hot air of the home coming into the top of the unit. It is going to move across the coil, which is here, which is very cold. When the warm air moves across the cold coil, remember what happens. When air cools down, it can no longer hold its moisture. So the cooler, drier air comes back into the room to circulate and keep us comfortable. But all of this moisture has to go somewhere. You see these lines connecting the indoor to the outdoor unit? These lines right here include the electrical connecting the two together, the line set moving refrigerant from this outdoor coil to this indoor coil. We also have the drain line. The drain line attached to this indoor coil is allowing it to safely drain this moisture to the outside. Now, if you put this in when the home was being built, all this would be hidden. However, that's not how most ductless or mini splits are done. They're usually added on later. So how do we accommodate all of these lines, the electric, the drain line, and the line set? Here's what it looks like. Something called a line hide will cover the wiring, the line set, and the drain line. So here we have an upstairs mounted head. Here's all those lines coming down, covered by the line hide coming to the outdoor unit. Here we have two indoor head options, one upstairs, one downstairs, both coming to the outdoor unit. Now it looks like they matched this to the siding of the home. Kind of stands out a little bit less than this one over here, although it does match the trim, doesn't it? So that looks nice. So you get the idea. That's how we compensate that if we do this as an add-on after the home is complete. There are different design options. You can have one indoor head to one outdoor unit, or multiple indoor heads. You see a couple of ceiling cassette options, a wall-mounted option, and then a floor model that's available as well. So you can have indoor combinations paired up to one outdoor unit as long as you design that according to the manufacturer's guidelines. In a subsequent session coming up, we're going to walk through some of those design metrics that you have to go through. And with ductless, like any of these systems, You have to follow the manufacturer's design recommendations for them to work properly. But where you do, these are great, great little systems. Where do you normally see them applied? Bonus rooms, sunrooms, home additions, garage or utility workspaces, and something that we have seen emerge over the last decade or so is an increase in new home market application of this particular type of system. One reason it stands out among all others is because they are very, very efficient. Now, again, in subsequent sessions, we're going to define efficiency terminology. One of the things we'll look at is SEER, S-E-E-R. It is a way of rating the efficiency of the cooling part of the system over the cooling season. To give you an example of how efficient ductless systems are, the traditional split systems that we looked at earlier as we began our first session, and we also looked at some of those in session number 2 here. Those systems are very efficient, but in the market today, the highest efficiency score in that SEER category for a traditional split system is 28 SEER, which is phenomenally good. When I started way back in 1811, the SEER ratings were about 10. So much better. Would you care to take a guess what the most efficient ductless system is rated at today in this category? Remember, the highest rated traditional split system is 28, as of this recording at least. The highest rated SEER efficiency score for a ductless system at the time of this recording is over 40. Unbelievably efficient. That is why they have caught the eye of a lot of custom home builders in particular who have begun to use this type of technology as part of their primary system design for their customers. So let's go through a review as we get ready to bring session number 2 to a close. How was a geothermal system different than a traditional system? Now think about it. A lot of things we could say here, but what is the fundamental difference, right? Think about not so much the where the systems are located or whatnot, or in or out, but in terms of their core design, what is the fundamental difference? The fundamental difference between a geothermal system and a traditional system is that geothermal exchanges heat with the earth, whereas the traditional systems exchange heat with the air. How about this one? Here's one we haven't talked about. This is a little bit of a preview of some things that we're going to get into coming up in our next session together. But I want to get your best guess, if you will, while we're here. What percentage of homes would you say would have at least one indoor air quality issue taking place? What do you think? What percentage of homes would you say would have at least one indoor air quality issue taking place? You think it would be a quarter of the homes? Half? 60%? Believe it or not, the EPA did a study, and this was before the coronavirus and COVID-19. They discovered, you ready for this? 96% of homes that were tested had at least one indoor air quality issue. So the good news for you and I is we have a lot of products that can really help the quality of the air that customers are breathing. And we're going to look at some of those coming up in our subsequent sessions together. So a little bit of conversational knowledge review as we wrap this section up. What were the 4 types of loop used with geothermal? 4 main loop designs that we looked at. So think on that for a moment. The 4 loop types that are predominantly used in geothermal. Okay, let's see how you did. The 4 would be horizontal, vertical, a pond or a lake loop, or a well loop. Those are the 4 dominant design that are used with a geothermal loop configuration. What about this one? What are some benefits of ductless systems? Let's pretend you're talking to a customer. How would you describe that? Just jot a few of those down before I show you what I have here. What are some benefits of ductless systems? They are similar to the traditional, but they are different, aren't they? The way they're designed is different. The way they are set up. They have a couple of, top of mind distinct advantages. One is just right there in their name, right? So what would you say? What would that conversational knowledge be with a customer? So a couple of the things that I would encourage you to highlight, they're less intrusive, right? Ductless means that we don't have to run a bunch of duct work all over the place to deliver comfort into the space. They are highly efficient. In fact, compared to a traditional system, they are significantly more efficient in many of the model configurations, so that is a consideration for sure. And third, there's really no better way to provide room-to-room comfort than the ductless options because, again, it is focused on delivering the comfort literally room to room because that is its specific application. Hey, just like that, congratulations, because you have come to the end of session number 2 here in HVAC Onboarding.